Hi, this is Jan, and this is the Jan Files. I'm going to remind you to subscribe. I'm also going to remind you, although I'm going to shorten this video, make it shorter than I initially intended, you can hit your little gear wheel in the top and it'll drop down a menu and it'll give you playback speed. You can put the playback speed at 1.25, which will make this go faster, but you'll still be able to easily understand what I'm saying. So I'm going to talk today about Ghislaine Maxwell. I'm going to talk about the fact that she's been moved to a comfy prison in Texas. I'm going to also talk about her trial and what the prosecutor said in a trial. I'm going to go through some of this. It's going to be maybe a little distracting because I'm going to have to look down as I talk, but that's just really an FYI. But what I'm really going to say here is that this is an abomination. And I mean, not just what has happened, not just that there are all of these young girls, 14, 15, 16 years of age at the time, who are raped and sexually assaulted. Okay? I'm going to talk about that somehow the Trump administration thought it was okay for Donald Trump's personal attorney, also known as the under what the second in line in the attorney general. Sorry, I can't remember his title, but he's working for the Justice Department. He's number 2 at the Justice Department, and he's Donald Trump's personal lawyer. Okay, so the idea that this man went down to the jail in Florida and spent 2 days with her, and then shortly afterward she ends up in a comfy prison where she gets to eat yoga. Probably does get to eat yogurt, but it's, it has yoga. It's a minimum security prison. It's not for sexual offenders, okay? That is not the kind of prison that sexual offenders go to. So they had to make an exception for her to be there. For what? For whatever her testimony is? Now, what do you think that testimony is going to be? It's not going to end, it certainly won't allow us to know more about Donald Trump's role in all of this. We already know the Justice Department let him know that he was in a lot of the records, okay? And that's why they decided to come out and say, hey, no big deal here. There is no list. And I'm going to remind you again of the evidence. Lists are kind of backup evidence, okay? What is evidence is the fact that they have hard drives, they have videotapes, they have photographs, they have binders, they have also other kinds of evidence in terms of logs. That is, like I said, those kinds of things, whether it's a plain log or is only part of the process, okay, in terms of part of the evidence needed to find somebody guilty or find Ghislaine guilty, she was found guilty, obviously. She is in prison. But I'm going to just look at the transcript of the prosecutor's summation. I was going to read the whole thing and I said, oh my God, nobody will be able to deal with that. So I'm going to try to skip through and highlight some of these horrendous stories that the victims told at the trial, and some of the evidence. So one of the things you should know is the defense continuously argued that she was just like a personal assistant, that there was no that there was no, quote, relationship there, despite all the pictures, despite all of the evidence of her rule book in the house and telling people she was lady of the house in Miami, or West Palm Beach, or Palm Beach, wherever it was. So let me read you a few of this through these and see if your reaction is the same as mine, okay? Ghislaine Maxwell was dangerous. She was a grown woman who preyed on vulnerable kids, young girls from struggling families. She targeted a girl whose father had just died. She targeted a girl whose mother was an alcoholic. She targeted a girl with a single mom who was struggling to raise her daughters. Maxwell was a sophisticated predator who knew exactly what she was doing. She ran the same playbook again and again and again. She manipulated her victims and she groomed them for sexual abuse. She caused deep and lasting harm to young girls. It is time to hold her accountable. And that is directly from the prosecution's beginning of or closing argument. What you should really understand, and this is what part of this transcript lays out, is that they operated together. Maxwell and Epstein were partners, and they weren't just partners. First of all, they had a personal relationship for a while, and they were also business partners, and they operated all of this together. Okay? She's not a victim here. There is no victimization of Ghislaine Maxwell. So let's remember who should be getting the priority treatment, whose testimony we should be looking for. Okay? The victims. Now, here's again more testimony. Summation. Jesus, I'm screwing up, sorry. Now, being the right hand to a multimillionaire came with serious benefits to Maxwell. As his partner, she had access to enormous wealth and lived his luxury lifestyle. She spent her weeks flying on Epstein's private jet from his mansion on the Upper East Side to his ranch in New Mexico, to his villa in Palm Beach, to his apartment in Paris, and to his private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Together, they moved in a social circle of rich and famous people. Now, there was a man by the name of Juan Alessi who actually worked for Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell from the early 1990s to 2002. And so he testified at the trial about her preparing a rule book of how she and Epstein liked everything done, from what their breakfast should be, where to place items, et cetera, what duties they had to do and how they wanted them to do it. Now, I want to tell you that here he comes, sorry. So, Mr. Alessi testified to this, and this is from the prosecutor. In fact, even the sex toys in the massage room had to be returned to a basket in Maxwell's bathroom closet. That's what Mr. Alessi had to do. Here's his testimony about that. He told you about having to wash off dildos after the massages and how he would return them to a basket in Maxwell's closet. Now, so remember, the massages were for Epstein, but the dildos got returned to her closet. And so let me say that sentence again. He told you about having to wash off dildos after the massages and how he would return them to a basket in Maxwell's closet because that's where they were kept. Again and again, the evidence of this trial showed you how closely Maxwell was involved in Epstein's so-called massages. She managed all of the details, right down to the lotions and oils. She was in the whole thing. you know, I remember what it was like to be 16 and 17 and to question my own judgment. I remember that. I remember feeling like, um, is this appropriate? Like when a photographer, was doing, quote, my headshots because I came to the city to be an actor and told, like, well, you can take your top off. And I was like, what? For headshots? And I didn't do it. I think I had something around, whatever. But what the feeling was, I remember questioning myself because I had a friend at the time who was a top model. And a top model. And I knew that they sometimes would, in different scenarios, were walking around with not much on. And I thought, am I being a prude? Like, is this, I wasn't sure, right? But, I came out of that unscathed. But the feeling at that young age of not knowing, and that was one of the things that Maxwell counted on, right? That these are really young girls that were in strong need of parents who didn't have parents that were really around and doing right by them. And so they were susceptible. They were susceptible to somebody coming and wanting to be their friend, this very posh English woman who wanted to be their friend and introduce them to famous people and et cetera, et cetera. So they fell for that and then got slowly manipulated and slowly involved, some faster than others, into the whole massage scenario. And that massage scenario is when these girls were touched, raped, etc. And that happening and the shame that eventually came to all of them as they got older and as they began to understand that this was, a relationship that was not only harming them at the moment, that as the years went on, they recognized how much harm had been done. More than one of them talked about who they had kids. They didn't want to let their kids out of their sight. They couldn't let them out of their sight. It freaked them out too much, especially if they had daughters. Okay. And so one of the women, Virginia Giuffre, who killed herself this past April, also said, she had daughters that she couldn't bring herself to, let them be. She couldn't, put away the feeling of the fear, the deep fear of what could happen, because she knew what could happen, right? She valiantly tried to struggle against all that had happened to her over the years that she was with Epstein, and she lost that battle. And so one of the things, and why I keep talking about these victims, is they deserve, okay, for us to pay attention to them. And the fact that Ghislaine, excuse my language, Ghislaine, let's just call her Maxwell, whatever. She did this in concert with Epstein. Okay, that the trial made clear that it was, and actually very detailed in terms of who was supposed to do what and who was cleaning up and when, who was answering the phone, the way the messages had to be taken. There was so much detail involved in the planning of all of this, and also making sure that certain people weren't around when some of this behavior was happening. But they also tried to make this behavior look normal. Like they have pictures of Jeffrey and Ghislaine hanging out naked in the pool, right? Taken by somebody else. Okay, so there was somebody else there taking these pictures. But one of the young women describes walking out to the pool area where nobody had any clothes on. So I don't want to go through, all of these things that happened to these young women. What I want to talk about is now, okay? Because now what is happening with the Trump administration is an abomination. That's being nice. The idea that anybody thinks that Trump is going to turn over evidence or have the DOJ, who is in his pocket, there is no distinction between that they're supposed to be between the executives and the administration and the DOJ. Okay, that is supposed to be two separate things. And they don't. Remember how everybody became up in arms when Bill Clinton got on a plane where Loretta Lynch was, who was the Attorney General at the time during the 2016 election, right? That there was this uproar because he went on the plane, okay? Trump's personal attorney is number 2 at the DOJ. Now, if you think for a second that anything they show you is going to have Trump's name on it, unless it's just on a list of people flying on an airplane, you're hot. That stupid line of "I got a bridge to sell you," right? Like, are you kidding? So I don't know how the evidence will come out. I don't know if it will come out, at least anytime soon. Ultimately, I believe we will know about all of this, but when? In the meantime, our focus needs to be on telling the stories of the victims, okay? Trump lies through his teeth every time he opens his mouth. It was a hoax. He wasn't on it. If his name is on it, people put it in there. I never went to the island. I didn't have the privilege of going to Jeffrey's Island. He said something, he stole. Trump, quote, said Epstein stole Virginia Giuffre from him. So we've all heard all of his ramblings about young women and beautiful women and Epstein's comments that he likes them young and all of the photographs. My instinct, and that's all it is, tells me that there's lots more evidence, and I'm sure it's not just Trump, by the way. I don't care, and I'm going to say this, I've said this on a minute, I don't care who was on that list. If they had raped, because that's the only way, you can't say had sex with, no. If they raped underage girls, every single one of those people should be found and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Now, if you want to read, I downloaded it to my iPad, the transcripts, they're available. You can read the testimony of the victims and the prosecutors. And obviously, there's also the defense there. But she was found guilty with good reason, with hard evidence. If I hear anybody else, some Republican, I think his last name is Kelly, actually said she's a victim, that Maxwell is a victim. No, she is not a victim. Come and talk to me, Mr. Kelly, because I'm happy to talk to anybody. And you're like, well, who the hell are you? You know what? I'm a woman with some age on her. I'm a woman who's been around the block a few times. I'm a woman who's learned to speak her mind and has no longer any F's to give. So you should speak to me because I also make sure I get the facts. That is the most important thing to me, are facts, truth, and common sense. Okay? So the common sense part of this is, who on this planet thinks Trump's DOJ will release any evidence that ever implicates Trump. Nobody. And anyone who thinks that's going to happen, you know, our best bet right now is that people start being whistleblowers. That some of the FBI agents who looked at all of these tapes and all of these photographs and all of this other stuff speak out. Share the evidence. I'm sure some of them probably kept it. So, you know, I don't know, folks, but we can't let this go. If we let it go, I want to know what that says to our girls. I have 2 daughters. I want to know what you think they're going to think if that she is perceived as the victim, or that Trump is perceived as a victim in all of this, is certainly not okay with me. So, like I said, put it at 1.25 so you can hear it. And I will be coming up with some more actual tangible evidence, evidence. It's not like I dug up the evidence, okay? But it is the transcript. It is a legal document, and it tells us all what happened. Now, we need to know a lot more. Thank you, and see you soon.